It's an adequate lens to look at virtually any human issue, right? So you can look at marriage from an economic point of view. You can look at child rearing. You can certainly look at environmental issues. So I think it's a very powerful lens from which to study human behavior. But it's not the only perspective. So I've always tried to keep up good ties with academics in political science and sociology and history especially. And I think there are different lenses and they bring different perspectives. So I try not to be an economic chauvinist. I think we have a powerful toolkit, but I try to learn from other disciplines and other types of academics and non-academics. I think cultural perspective can be brought into the economics framework. We think of that in terms of preferences. Just in different societies, people have different types of preferences about, male-female relationships, child rearing, all kinds of different aspects of life. And you can bring that into the economics toolkit as a kind of, differences in preferences. In practice, what that means is when you're thinking about how a particular policy will play out in China, policy that had a certain effect in Mexico is not going to have the same effect in China because institutions are different, because the cultural history is different, the geography is different. I think that's probably the most common mistake economists make, is to simplify too much and to think that because a policy worked in Mexico in 1985, that it's going to have the same effect in China in 2007. And I personally think the world is much more complicated than that. So, culture and preferences very much come into what are the effects of different policies or different changes. One thing I think I've learned is the power of institutions. And this is a somewhat vague word that can mean different things to different people, but I think of it as fundamental norms of behavior, kind of deep-seated rules of society, which have often grown up over thousands of years, or certainly over hundreds of years. So I do think the institutions very much mediate what the effect of policies are on human behavior and on what are the final outcomes. So I have developed a very healthy respect for economic history. If you really want to understand what the effect of policies will be in China, then I think it is important to understand the history of the country, how the institutions have developed, and that gives you an insight into how people are going to react to different changes.